On this week's episode, friends don't let friends.
Censor their bodies, their sex life, their pregnancy experience, their postpartum experience. It's all good in the hood when it comes to bodies, sex, pregnancy, postpartum.
Hello and welcome to
Good for you.
Good for you, man. Good for you. Good for you.
Good for you, a podcast about the things we ghosted, the purchases that haunt us, and the best products, services, and industry happenings in the wellness, well-being, and spiritual space. We're going to give you a healthy little dose of fun. We're going to talk about the things that are happening in pop culture, the ones that got away, the things in our cart that are haunting us or ghosting us, our strong opinions,
that are loosely held. We like to call this the Grext,
the group text.
the group text in your ear.
So come say hello. Join us in the audio Grext, where friends don't let friends
Get scammed.
Hello, hello. It is just Wallace on the mic this week, but not for long. Michelle will be back soon. I just recently got off the phone with Michelle and Rhodes and Janelle. Rhodes is the new addition to the Pelazon Lipsitz family, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on Michelle's business on the podcast, but I just heard about her birth experience, and I was dying to hear about it, but wanted to give her space and not prod and let her be in her baby cocoon situation. And it was great to hear and talk about it, especially a few weeks later, because she is in baby bliss land. She is glowing. She really has that postpartum glow. And things are all good over there. So we miss her on the pod in the Good For You universe, but she is around. She has stories, and she will be back soon. So this week we have a wonderful interview with the founders of Jems condoms. Whitney and Yasmin co-founded Jems together a few years ago, and what they're doing is really a long overdue reinvention of how we think about, market, design, and talk about condoms. Whitney and Yasmin come from a design background. They started a design and creative studio together in Toronto almost a decade ago, and I believe it was post baby number 2 for both of them that they noticed a huge area of opportunity when it came to condoms, and especially their associated taboos. And really that when you're looking for condoms in any retailer, for the most part, you're seeing these extremely outdated modes of marketing. And that's exactly what Whitney and Yasmin aim to do with Jems. They're extremely interested in speaking to the multiplicity of gender and sexual expressions, and they're not afraid of breaking down a lot of the stigmas and long overdue stereotypes that we have when we think about Magnum condoms and Trojan condoms. And especially when it comes to practicing safe sex, there is a lot of conversation happening around that right now, as there's reports of condom usage has gone way down. And what they're doing is aesthetically beautiful and very intelligent. It's a space that has been dying for a new conversation around safe sex, sexual health. So I'll let you guys get into the episode yourselves. But we talk about the censorship that they face on TikTok and Instagram, and what a challenge that still remains to be for a lot of companies that are working in the sexual wellness and health space. We also talk about the sex unique scams that they see out there in this space, which they have a really great one. And we get to their haunted carts at the end. We hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to Good For You, Whitney and Yasmin. It's so exciting to have you here. I recently received a package of your wonderful Jems product in the mail, and I have yet to try it, I must admit, but I just received it last week, so I can't wait to try the condoms. But before we get into the birth story of Jems, I would love to prompt you guys with a question of, how do you feel about the lack of options right now in terms of STI protection and in general, just safe sex protection, especially for people who don't have penises?
I mean, we've been talking about this a lot. Obviously, we're pro reproductive rights in a big way. And it's really how Jems started, was thinking about the demographic that it really impacts. But we've seen a huge boom in sexual wellness. Over the pandemic, all of a sudden there was vibrators at bookstores and in places that you would never expect them to be. And that's amazing. And of course, we totally support that. But what we also noticed was there was a lack of safer sex getting the same attention. And similarly, even in big box retailers, it's like condoms are obviously often under lock and key. And that's because they're primarily an item that is stolen a lot, not because of the price point, but because they're typically embarrassing. And we really feel like there are a lack of options. And clearly with the advent of Roe v. Wade adds a whole other element to not being able to access birth control options.
Absolutely. Also, the options at the counter. I know that you guys are trying to get your product actually at the checkout counter, which I think is genius. And I'm so curious about what's that like in terms of the behind the scenes with retailers? Is that a hard space to occupy? What's the competition like at the counter to get placement?
It certainly is a hard it's a coveted space. It's prime real estate for retailers. But what we've done, with our 3-pack, that's, we really designed it in a way to make it appealing to the eye, cute, a little bit discreet, although we're not really trying to hide what it is, because this is about normalizing condoms and having them at, checkout being a normal thing. So the size, I think, makes it very appealing to place there, and it can also live in a container. It can be stacked. There are different ways in which it can live in a retailer's sort of checkout area. We've also produced these silicone cases.
They're so cute.
that have a dual function. So they are literally to protect condoms when you're carrying them, because that's something, again, there's little awareness around how to carry condoms safely. So putting it in your back pocket or your wallet isn't exactly wise. We worry about it getting punctured or degrading over time. And so these silicone cases offer a little bit of protection, but it also adds a little bit of a lifestyle element to Jems, in the sense of they're sweet, they're covetable, they just kind of feel like that little thing that you want to pick up at when you're checking out, because they're cute and they're useful, and they can carry your condoms. And that's another way I think that we're working with retailers to rethink how condoms can be sold and where they can be sold.
I mean, I think so much of the buying process, when we first got into this, we were like, STIs are at the highest level they've ever been in history. They're predominantly affecting those between the ages of 15 to 25. Marginalized communities are the most at risk. And then it's like, we did a bunch of focus groups with young people, like just talking to young people one-on-one about their buying experience. And it's like, what we realized was you've taken the most embarrassing product, you've put it in the most embarrassing packaging, and then you've put it in the most embarrassing aisle, and you're wondering why nobody's using it. So we've really sought to disrupt all three of those things. So even beyond getting the condoms at the checkout, it's like putting them next to things that are also covetable. So next to where you're just grabbing a coffee, or in places where you would otherwise grab lip gloss. And, people are used to protecting themselves now with masks and sanitizer. So why isn't it being sold along those things? Again, it doesn't necessarily need to be in the aisle with the sex stuff.
Absolutely. So is that an expensive spot at retailers? Is it really price pointing?
It is. So I think when you're working with, more traditional big box stores and pharmacies, yes, there is a pay to play component. I think, again, part of our sales strategy includes being in retailers that you wouldn't typically expect to find condoms. So say retail boutiques, bars, hotels, and there we get to work a little bit more one-on-one with each retailer, talk about where they can be placed, how they can be placed. And of course, that's less formalized in terms of what the cost is. And I think because of the novelty effect too, those who get it really get it, and they're excited to do so, which is exciting for us, of course.
Well, it's kind of crazy to think about how little innovation, and I know this is partly why the white space that you guys saw in this space, there's been so little innovation, even just in the marketing and packaging of condoms. It's kind of insane. Absolutely. There's a lot of products like that I think about, even with mouthwash or razors, because I know there's a monopoly in terms of who can actually make razors in North America. There are all of these very useful, essential hygiene and sexual health products that are just waiting to be reimagined. And when you guys were designing the branding and the strategy around the marketing, what was your primary driver?
I mean, so our background, Yasemin and I have had a design studio called Whitman Emerson that we started, like we were mentioning, in New York when we first started working together. And then we've had it in Toronto for the last 10 years. So we really came at it from a brand side where we were standing in a large big box retailer and we were looking down one aisle of men's skincare, and it was like an entire aisle, you know, like a city block. And it was all kinds of eye creams, like things that didn't exist 10 years ago. And then when you shifted to the right and you saw the condom aisle, it just looked like you were saying like something out of the 1950s. So really from a brand side, it was like, you know, instantly we felt like we weren't represented in that aisle, but we knew like when we were talking about it, that there was just something so much bigger out there. So what we really sought out to do was to create something that would feel aligned with everything else Gen Z has in their life. So something, you know, everything's designed now. Your toothpaste is cute. You know, this is the world that we live in.
There's no excuse for bad design yet.
Yeah. So we wanted it to be something that would be the opposite of how condoms are usually shoved away in drawers. This would be something that people would feel comfortable leaving on their countertops. And we really meticulously designed the package in a way that it stands out on the shelf. And we kind of did a photograph and we would re-Photoshop in the package on the shelf. And I think even to, maybe Yasemin, you can talk about this, but even to the way we designed the package, the whole intention of it was really to appreciate the fact that sex when you're younger is a very awkward experience. So all of these tropes.
Also, maybe when you're not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it could be awkward all the time.
It's true. You're right.
1000%. So, you know, the tropes have always been like, oh, it's so romantic, or like, oh, it's so sexy and cool and all these things. So we really leaned into this place of this kind of uncomfortable discomfort. So, you know, the colors that we have are these kind of awkward colors together, the typography, everything about it is meant to be kind of just embracing that sensibility.
Yeah, I think to add more to that, it's really just about making it genderless. That was something we really noted in the existing aisle. It felt so gendered, it felt so masculine, and it felt like an outdated notion of what masculinity is. And so we really wanted to tackle that. We also noticed that the ingredients aren't really listed on most condom packages, and we found that really surprising. Whitney's celiac, and so it's really important for her to know what's in everything, especially something that's going close to reproductive organs. You know, you want to know. And so we made the decision to really list the ingredients or lack thereof, because truly that's kind of what we did when we set out to create this product. It was 100% latex, 100% silicone lube, nothing more. And so we listed that so people knew front and center what they were getting. Those were really the things that dictated sort of our design choices. And fundamentally, it was about taking shame out of the conversation so that when people are in that aisle, when they have it on their nightside table, they're not embarrassed or feeling shameful about this. In fact, we want it to be almost something that you carry with pride. And so that's kind of why we're trying to help inject this cool factor into it as well, because it's really, you know, protecting yourself is a good thing, and it should be something you're proud to do.
And it should be pretty. Why not?
Absolutely. 100%.
Oh my gosh, beautiful roses. I'm throwing roses, 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 roses.
You can tell, I think, and just because this is something I, Michelle, my co-host on this podcast, appreciate so much is good design, because you can tell how much thought went into your product design and the strategy. Like there's so much intention and care, even if that intention is to make it feel approachable and relaxed. It's just very clear. How long did it take you guys workshopping this to kind of decide on the brand? What was that process like?
It took a long time.
It did. It was long.
We had a lot of fun with it. So first and foremost, I think Whitney and I have been truly interested in you know, the CPG space. And even though we didn't know when we started a design company that this is where we would end up, it's not a surprise to us that we decided to launch our own product. I think it's just something that we have been passionate about all along. We've worked along many exciting startups. So we really enjoyed the process. And I think it was, you know, designing for ourselves as a client was a really interesting process and often the hardest thing to do. But we have an incredible design team. We were lucky to have this engine behind us with Whitman Emerson because we were able to approach it in a way that I don't think a lot of startup founders have, truthfully. So we were very fortunate in that sense.
Especially to do it in-house.
Absolutely.
I think that makes such a big difference when you're able to really work as a team together.
And especially when it's the core skill set of what we do.
Exactly.
But when we look back, sometimes we have folders of all the iterations from where we started to where we ended up. And it's almost like a fun roller coaster ride to see how it evolved.
That's the content I want to see also. I'm like, walk us through the brand story.
Actually, that's great insight because we can absolutely share that on social. I think that would be something, that would be really fun to show the behind the scenes of how we got to where we got to.
I think that's so interesting. I mean, that's where I geek out too. And you guys have great blog content that I imagine is hopefully also contributing to your SEO strategy. I know it's kind of this hard space where you probably find a lot of your clientele on social, but then you're also censored so much in terms of what you can talk about. So how do you navigate that, especially as all of these changes are happening with these platforms? And then you're like, how do we find our audience?
Yes, this is a big question for sure. And to be honest, we're just kind of figuring it out now. The censorship piece has been
honestly everyone.
Totally, absolutely. Yeah. The censorship piece and the shadow banning was a major shock to us. When we first thought about this, we were like very enterprising about, we're like, oh my gosh, like governments are going to give us money to talk about this. Like everybody wants people using condoms. In the 80s, government spent millions to try to tackle the AIDS epidemic. And then only to find that even when we wrote the word condom in our headline on Instagram, that we couldn't put that up there, that we had to put a 0 in the word, and it's a top World Health Organization essential medical device. It seems really counter. And, so we've done everything in terms of following community guidelines, which essentially say that you can post about condoms, but never in relation to pleasure, which is a whole other topic, seems insane. But even without doing that, we still get flagged, we get banned. So we have only really done organic social stuff to now, but we did a Use a Condom campaign. We had people and influencers wearing Use a Condom t-shirts. And even that, people would tell us, influencers that had big numbers when they, that they would usually get on posts, and when they would post our stuff, nobody would see it. So it's definitely deep entrenched within TikTok. And it's been a thing because, like you said, we love the content on the blog. We're really proud. We always said we wanted to use our space, any voice, to really put out sex education that was holistic and progressive and kind of relevant, that talked about everything from, consent and bodies to, kind of as an older sibling would be telling you about. But it's been, and then we wanted to filter that through social media, and it's definitely been a challenge.
Well, I imagine too on the technical side, because there's such an issue with porn. So not to give these platforms credit, but I know that it's a very complicated issue, but it's also usually the result of pretty oppressive algorithms that are created by people who are in positions of power that, whether consciously or unconsciously, contributing to minorities being oppressed by these algorithms. So it's complicated on that side of things too. I'm pretty sure you still can't show a nipple that is not considered like a male's nipple on Instagram.
Right. And I mean, we would get flagged where it was somebody wearing a t-shirt that said use a condom, nothing pornographic.
Yeah, I really feel for you guys, especially right now in the CPG and D2C space. It's such a shifting environment, and to be constantly kind of juggling and dependent on these apps, but trying not to be is such a challenge.
It absolutely is. And I think it facilitated some conversations with retailers, because what we keep saying is that we're living in an environment where choices are being stripped in front of our eyes, and we are not able to promote really the education that we're trying to get out there. And so, we're shifting by having in-person events, panel discussions, sponsoring events where we can, get word out there. But we keep mentioning to retailers, it's actually now the onus is on retailers to provide more options, to have them more readily available, to have them in places where they wouldn't normally have been as a response to what's happening culturally. Again, it's all with this mindset of shifting perception and normalizing condoms and condom use and where they can be accessed.
one of the things that I thought is so interesting about your story too is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had the idea for Jems when you had both recently given birth, or you were in transition from deciding, am I going to go back on some kind of birth control? What do we do? And I think it's so fascinating. Currently, Michelle is on mat leave. She just gave birth to her son at the end of November. And we recently interviewed an amazing founder duo of the Goodbye app. And I'm like, it sounds like you might know who they are.
Yeah, we do. And we listened to that episode, actually. We loved that episode. So
they were great, but also a similar story to you guys in terms of not only being good friends who have founded several businesses together now, but also being in the space where you're post giving birth and have an incredible idea for a business. I'd love to hear about like that time for you guys and what that was like, because it seems like a very creative, fertile time in a lot of women's lives, kind of surprisingly in a way.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting that you say that, because I do think that's really true. And it's funny because we actually rarely talk about that side of it. And it's probably because we could get into it. But in a lot of publications, it'll end up saying moms as the headline. And we always think that's kind of funny because it never feels first and foremost to what we did. But yeah, we both had kind of eschewed birth control, hormonal birth control a long time ago. And we were between pregnancies. I think I was between my first and second, and Yasmin just after her first. And we found ourselves in the condom aisle. And like we said, we were kind of in that situation where I believe it was me who was in the condom aisle. And I called Yasmin and said, I can't believe this. What I'm seeing, this is crazy. I feel like we could do something about this. And then it was that trip that we'd taken actually to a Target in Buffalo, where we found ourselves in that corner of the aisle where we'd had men's skincare on the left and the 1950s condom aisle on the right. And by this point, I guess I was pregnant with my third and Yasmin was pregnant with her second. And it was just before the pandemic hit. So it was a very funny time to be thinking about this, both because we always talked about it was like nobody saw us with our pregnant bellies while we were launching Jems because it was the deep, dark days of the pandemic. But had they, we would both have been essentially selling condoms with giant bellies, which would have been really funny.
I also content I want to see.
But I think it is a really interesting point about it being a fertile time for ideas and entrepreneurial spirit, because Whitney and I always say too, the mission of what we're doing and the goal that we have that is sort of our North Star every day when things that feel hard, what we come back to is so deep that it really is the thing that we are thrilled to be, if there's going to be something taking time away from our family, it has to be something bigger than us, bigger than, what we're doing on the everyday. And if this is one of those things where in the back of our mind, our children really are motivating us because we want the landscape that they come into to feel very different than the landscape we walked into in that kind of coming of age and sex education and feeling like you have choices that fit your needs and the freedom to pursue those. So we just really, we figure we have another few years before we have kids that age, and we have a lot of work to do to get there.
I mean, thinking about the sex education that I had in maybe middle school, I do remember being shown a female condom and being like, I don't understand how that's going to work.
Right.
And being so confused about like this looks like a crazy puzzle piece. I'm curious about what you guys think about that side of things, like getting into the spaces of other types of condoms in the future or other products.
Yeah, it's a really good question. We've been female condoms, dental dams is another product that I think there's little education around.
Also, what a name.
Absolutely.
We've talked about that.
It's the same thing. It comes down to how you're talking about it, how you're presenting it, and is that the right way to talk about it? And you're right, it's not. No one needs to think about it as a dental dam.
I think about something obviously at the dentist, which no one likes to think about. And then you're like, no, no, thank you. But even just in the content that you guys have already put out, there's such an approachability and a vibrancy to it, and especially a youthful take. And I know one of the things that you guys are looking at too is the lack of use of condoms in the Gen Z space. I'm curious if there is any correlation to the stats you hear about younger people having less sex. What do you guys think about that?
I think the condoms thing is very much related to the fact that condoms were really associated with the AIDS epidemic. And now, in lieu of, young people in general not being as scared of AIDS and things like PrEP, they don't feel as connected that they need them. And obviously this is a fallacy because the STIs are an all-time high. Things like syphilis or gonorrhea, strains that are antibiotic resistant are back. It's very important, and condoms are the number one line of defense for this, that we understand from, the best infectious disease specialists. But there hasn't been this promotion to young people. And similarly, it's like condoms also suffer from this idea that they really decrease pleasure. This idea that like, oh, so-and-so won't want to wear one, or won't, I don't want to have that awkward moment during the event. And I think that's something else we're really seeking to tackle in this way, that we really believe that pleasure, that your inhibition is greater when you feel safe. So it's a funny analogy, but I was watching a friend of mine's kid in a pool try to swim when she was in a life jacket that didn't fit her at all. And then all of a sudden she got put into a life jacket that fit. And it was like, perfect. Like I can swim and I feel great. We really believe that pleasure comes with feeling uninhibited. And that's like such an important part of this. And on another note too, we've been talking a lot about, it is an awkward moment, about getting the condom out in the event, but we actually think it's this amazing moment for pause in terms of consent. Like, is everybody okay with this situation? Is this what we want to be doing? And we think, the more that we can be talking about these things and having kind of that moment represented in a way in popular culture and otherwise, that it could change perception around condoms and using them.
Yeah, just normalizing it. And I think that's right. Like TV shows could do a better job of showing that moment.
Yeah.
We have a lot of notes of condom moments on TV or movies, and we always write it down, and we're like, we've got to change the way this is shown so that that moment doesn't become this kind of looming dread for everybody.
And to your point about pleasure too, I think we can very clearly picture what a male orgasm looks like on TV and have many, many, many examples. But even thinking about pleasure being something that we're comfortable showing in many different ways.
I think back again, I'm bringing it back to something, but the way childbirth is shown.
Yeah. It's also banned on Instagram. You can't watch birthing videos anywhere.
Right. Because people should not be aware of how that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And then suddenly you're tasked with doing it. And then you're like, wait, no, I've not seen this before. Can someone tell me what's about to happen? Which is the case of so many of my friends that I know.
Well, this is it. And birth is such a layered and nuanced experience and differing experience. And when you're only showed one portrayal of it, which is your water breaks, you start screaming immediately, you race to the hospital, and then you scream until you give baby to the birth. I mean, that's such a limited portrayal. And similarly, I think obviously mainstream media, but also pornography really skews the way, what sex looks like and should be. So again, it's just about showing different points of views, increasing representation of people having sex in different ways. We just need to really change the way we're approaching the topic altogether.
Absolutely. And of course, you're working against many centuries of gendered power dynamics that are just very hard to, take the bricks off of those walls.
But it's interesting, because what we have found with young people is that, it's the most fluid generation in history, and they're really breaking old tropes and stereotypes and taboos. Like they feel like the generation that can kind of break past all this. It's really, like you said, like the entrenched systems and kind of the past that we're working against.
Those people need to move on, retire. We need some new execs in Hollywood. Some younger execs.
Agreed.
Burn it.
What?
Did I say stand there and look stupid? No, I said burn it.
Well,
what's been some of the most interesting research that you found in terms of how to connect with and speak to who you're looking to connect with?
Because we've had such trouble getting our social content out there, we're still sort of truly learning.
Totally.
But I think what we have realized is, similar to the backlash of this inauthenticity that was felt on Instagram for so long and TikTok coming about because it was this realness that had been lacking in this authentic kind of portrayal of the human existence. I think, again, it's for us, we realize we just want to share content in a really truthful, raw, and authentic way. And so what we're setting out to do is get as many perspectives as we can and share authentic, relatable stories and get that out there so that no matter who you are and where you're coming from, you can find content that is relatable and speaks to you. And so I think that's kind of what we're aiming to do. Again, it's been a process and we're getting there, but that's our goal.
Always a work in process. Michelle and I have joked, of course, we love How I Built This, the iconic startup podcast. Yeah. But one of the things, because we work with so many small business owners, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs just at the beginning of their journeys, because we're also interested in startups and small businesses, we always joke there needs to be a podcast called I'm Building This, and in brackets, it's hard. And to hear more stories from this place of we're in process. This is of course in process. And it's lovely to hear the story at the end of the road once you've built this huge company after, 20 years. But I think it's so interesting and so refreshing to hear that genuine, honest answer of we're figuring it out, because you're also in the situation of constantly having to juggle these platforms that are obviously monopolies that are controlling all of this information that then you're like, okay, cool. This was part of the business plan. Now we have to switch it. And you have to remain so agile. So of course that means you're going to be constantly in research, in discovery mode.
Yeah. And I think, what we held on to, like, our audience really gets it. So when we do these in-person events and we connect with the community and things, we hear amazing feedback about, yeah, I need this, or yeah, I connect with this, or yeah, I should be using condoms, or like this, we get amazing feedback on the brand stuff and everything else. So we get that loop of, we know that it's resonating. We know people are into it. And I think that's where we just always go back to that. We know that and we believe that. And, like Yasemin said, the rest we're figuring out.
Yeah. And I think, again, one of the things that has been motivating for us, we've had conversations with, the top tier retailers and gotten great feedback. We've had conversations with 80-year-old uncles. We've had conversations with teenagers, and the feedback has been so positive, and this reinforcement of this work being important and something we need to keep pushing for is just the thing that we need to keep pushing through, because there have been many setbacks, some of them understandable, some of them completely unforeseen. Yeah. For instance, our warehouse in Derby, New York recently collapsed. And so we actually had quite a bit of inventory.
Just a small wrinkle in the plan.
Certainly something we didn't anticipate.
But that's real.
And Whitney and I make the joke, this is part of the How I Built This story. Every founder has a list of things that happened they couldn't have foreseen, but I think it's just about being confident in the mission and in the goal, and that's what keeps us going.
Absolutely. Okay, I have one more question before we have to talk about the sexy, unique scams that you're seeing out there and your haunted carts. But one of the things that you just said prompted me to think about, as we're living longer generally, and there's new definitions of monogamy and what partnerships look like, and people who maybe were divorced later in life getting back into relationships, are you at all interested or looking at like an older generation to market to as well? Is that something that you found in your research that people are looking for too?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, senior citizens in retirement communities, it's a big factor, like STI rates are booming. So it's absolutely something that we've talked about. And similarly, it's interesting, we hear a lot from parents of college age kids that say, I wanted to send my kid away to college, but I didn't want to give them a pack of something that had, a man's torso on it or a name like Magnum. And, and giving them a pack of Jems kind of opened up this door. So it's certainly something that we are interested in facilitating. I think it's important, as we know in terms of like what we do with design and branding, is you have to know who you're speaking to and you have to speak really directly to them. And, so I think we will always intentionally focus on the demographic that we've set out to. But that being said, nothing that we're doing is exclusive to anybody else. Certainly there's many people in their 40s that would feel connected to the brand. It's just about, making sure that you really focus on the community that you are trying to serve.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't love for the senior citizen community that STI rates are going up, but I do love to hear that there's a lot of activity at that age, because the stigma around sex then I think is also another thing that becomes more apparent as we're all, living longer. But that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, and that's why we really are interested actually in thinking about, we've been talking about that, but just even the young people with the older people, that's an interesting relationship. And again, it's like you're saying, it's taboo breaking. And, so that's actually something we find really interesting.
So our Sexy Unique Scam section of the podcast, we love to hear about what sexy unique scams you are seeing out there in your research or just as a consumer that you think people should be wary of and should watch out for. Or this could be a sexy unique scam that you were suspicious of, and then you were like, you know what? I was scammed by, but I would still buy this product.
One thing that comes to mind is because, again, Jems really focuses on safer sex products. And so when we were doing our research, something we noticed come up was sex toy cleaners. And we thought, maybe that is really important for safety, because obviously, you want to make sure the sex toys you're using are properly cleaned. Again, there's an education component around that. And so we looked into it. And we realized that there's really no reason you shouldn't be using soap and water.
Yeah.
And so
this is like douching 2.0. Wait a second.
Exactly. So we will not be putting out a toy cleaner anytime and would caution anyone to buying it, because there's truly no need. Just more stuff in the world that nobody needs.
No, those categories are so interesting where it's like, did you think I wouldn't catch on to what you're trying to sell me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Completely.
And have you tried anything recently that you guys were like, okay, I thought this was a scam, but I'm fully sold. I just can't go back now.
I think what's happening in the period care space is really interesting. And there's also a lot of talk about, the vaginal microbiome.
Yes.
And so it's hard because I think douching has, for me, put this block of, do not go there, don't mess with it. The less you do, the better. But I actually do think there are some really interesting companies out there that are, I think Honey Pot is one of them, where there's ways to actually prevent bacterial vaginosis and some other, just increase the microbiome. So there's some learning to do there, I think, around understanding what is beneficial and what's completely unnecessary. And so some clarity around that would be beneficial, I think, because you just have to dig a little bit deeper to understand.
Totally. And then also, I think what's interesting about this area too is as you try new products, I've definitely tried products that are herbal and natural, but I'm 99% sure have given me a yeast infection.
Right.
So it's like, oof, the wild, wild west. But I agree the education factor is so important, because I recently had a doctor describe a yeast infection to me as like a cold in your vagina. And I was like, because their explanation was when your immune system is suppressed, this is something that can happen. And there's obviously so many contributing factors to yeast infections, but there's an imbalance, and this is a way that your body's trying to essentially get rid of different bacteria that could be causing a virus. And I had actually recently had a cold before that infection. And so I thought that was an interesting way to describe it.
Absolutely. And again, something that for some reason has not been discussed enough. And I think, this is a women's health issue of we just have glossed over a lot of important aspects of women's health. I don't know if it's because it hasn't been studied enough. I don't know if it's because it's
like,
taboo to
women
talk
have hormones. That's too crazy. We can't study that.
Well, and endometriosis is a prime example where, a doctor said to my face, we just don't know that much about it.
Yeah.
And my response is, but why not? It can't be the Bermuda Triangle of conditions,
It seems to be.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can't cure the common cold. So if it's that's linked, then maybe,
right.
Yeah.
Maybe that makes more sense now.
Haunted cart. what products, services are out there right now that you're really either you've recently bought and you're sold, or you're curious about, you're interested in, you're scoping? What's haunting your carts?
Ooh, I definitely have a few right now. And Yasemin and I were recently in New York, and the store Susan Alexandra on the Lower East Side, there was a little beaded purse that was so cute that I'm just like waiting to pull the trigger on again for myself.
I love her stuff. It's so beautiful.
It is so beautiful, and it just feels so authentic and, you know, contrary to kind of the mass of so many things, how they feel right now.
Well, and we loved the idea of working with her to create a little carrier for condoms. So we're in the background, we're scheming.
Exactly.
Never not scheming.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And I think something else that's been definitely haunting, I think, our carts even, that we've been talking about, but it's one of those things you're like, is it a scam or not a scam, but like, do you need it, is the You Beauty line.
Okay, can we discuss? Because I, for a while, was on their text message. I still haven't bought anything, but I had signed up for their alerts. And the other day I had to decide. I was like, okay, Wallace, either do or die here. You have been receiving these messages for months and you haven't bought the product, but I still haven't purchased, and I'm so on the precipice, but they're pretty expensive. And so I'm like, I don't know. I go back and forth with beauty and facial products about how much I want to spend, and they're up there.
Well, it's so do we, and Whitney and I go back and forth a lot, and we're always talking about it because we oscillate between borderline making our own creams for our faces to then looking for, you know, the most scientifically backed, active ingredient filled items, and I still don't know where I stand.
No,
and it's somewhere in the middle.
Well, and we always talk about, before we had babies, you know, everything we put on our bodies was really as natural as it could be in that way. Like, it just felt like Yasmin always jokes, my body's not a temple anymore. Like, we're just joking that we're feeling free. So it's like, this has been haunting our cart in the way of like, you know, do something for yourself. But then, it's so bloody expensive that it just kind of sits there, and we're like, you know, but yeah.
Well, also it's like, I want something also that works.
I know.
So if that's going to be natural ingredients, incredible. But sometimes like, I want the chemicals, I want the stuff that's going to work, the magic. But then I waffle between this too, where it's so hormonally based for me, my skin. It's just like so cyclical, and it's so hard to remember that when it's happening. And there's so much of the inside work, but it's also fun to have fun products. So you may or may not go down the You Beauty path. You haven't decided.
My prediction is we will. It's just a matter of when.
Like, try something.
You'll have to let us know how it goes. Send us your review. We'll check back in with you.
Perfect.
I love it.
This has been so lovely, Yasemin and Whitney. Thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. And where can people follow along with all of your amazing content?
So for the long form version of our content, you can go to gemsforall.com, and on Instagram, we are at gemsforall, and same on TikTok.
And do you guys send out your amazing blog posts in newsletter form as well? Because you have incredible content on there. It's so educational.
We do, and we promise it's not a newsletter that is going to invade your inbox, so it is worth subscribing to.
Oh, I meant to ask you, because we are all fellow Torontonians, because I know we have some people listening who are in Toronto and Canada. Are there any places in store that people can go and check out and experience Jems now, today, tomorrow?
For sure.
For a complete list of stockists, our website and Instagram, you can check it out. But in Canada, you can find us at Whole Foods, at Loblaws, well.ca. So lots of options in Canada, as well as some sort of smaller boutiques, mostly in Montreal and Toronto.
Loblaws is huge. Congrats, by the way.
Thank you.
That's great.
And in the US, you can get us on Amazon and, of course, our site as well. And stay tuned for some more exciting announcements about big retailers picking Jems up soon.
Ooh, so exciting.
Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. Such a nice conversation to have. And honestly, like we said, it's hard to get the message out. So we really appreciate these opportunities to be able to talk to.
That is a wrap for Good For You 2022. Crazy. Thank you for sticking around for the ride with us. We will be back in your ear holes in 2023. Michelle will be back. We have an amazing year ahead. We're really excited for what's to come. We are keeping some of the favorite segments. We are always trying to make everything better for you and good for you. So it goes without saying that we love you and appreciate you and want to give you bigger, better giveaways and dupes and hacks and sexy unique scams to watch out for and all the haunted carts that your heart desires. So we can't thank you enough for listening and sticking around and letting us experiment and sharing your feedback. We will see you in 2023, and we are doing a special giveaway for the episode. Each week we give away a prize for a lovely review. We absolutely love bribing you. It's to your benefit. We give away amazing prizes each week that all you have to do is hit 5 stars, leave us a little comment in Apple Podcasts, and you will be automatically entered to win that week's prize. So when you submit a review on Apple Podcasts this week, you'll be entered to win an amazing Jems hoodie. It's great swag, a 12-pack of condoms, and their Take Me Out bundle, which is so cute. You can't miss it. We'll link it in the show notes. And this is a great gift also. You could win this and gift it to somebody else. You could break it up, use some of it for you, some of it for a friend. Also, I think I want to keep Jems condoms around like they're candy. Promote safe sex. Bring it into the conversation. So all of this is great value, great deal, by the way. Beautiful branding, beautiful merch, great products. So highly recommend you submit a review. And we will announce this prize winner on socials the first week of January and send it directly to your door. And we have a few prize winners from a few weeks ago that will be getting their wonderful prizes over the next few weeks. So you have a great chance of winning if you submit. Okay, well, happy holidays. Don't change, or do. Have a great summer. Bye.